Well, there we have it. England's first match of Euro 2024 is complete, and they have ended up as victors against Serbia with that tight 1-0 win and gone top of Group C. It was a pretty dominant and bright display for that first 30 minutes or so, but as we've come to expect under Gareth Southgate, it became a nervy and reduced affair as the match went on. I'm Hoopsa, I make videos on all things football, so let's chat through that performance and discuss the main talking points and the things we have learned from that match. And if you get to the end and you like what you see, don't forget to hit like and subscribe as well. As expected, Gareth Southgate set up with a 4-2-3-1, with Trent Arnold taking the midfield slot next to Declan Rice and with Jude Bellingham playing ahead of them in the number 10. This meant that Foden was pushed out onto that left-hand side with Trippier behind him at left back as Luke Shaw gets closer to fitness. He was on the bench but not ready to start this match. There was, of course, a big question with Harry Maguire not making it into the squad over who would take his slot, and that was Mark Gahey. But otherwise, it was business as usual with Pickford behind him, Stones next to him, Walker out on the right, Saka out on the right wing, and Kane up top. Serbia, meanwhile, set up in a 3-4-2-1 formation. Manager Dragan Stojkovic has chopped and changed his formations over the past year or so, but he has often favoured playing wing-backs, and that's exactly how he set up yesterday, with Vlahovic playing just behind Mitrovic up top. And as I say, there was lots to like about the first 20 to 25 minutes of England's performance. We were dominant, we were camped outside the Serbia box, and we were playing the ball around nicely. There weren't a great amount of openings. There was a couple of opportunities where Saka was nearly played in behind but was just blocked. But it didn't matter too much, and it felt like a matter of time before we would break them down, and once we did, it felt like a couple of goals could come. Now, there were a few interesting things of note in those opening minutes. Trent Arnold, in his new midfield role for the first time at a tournament next to Declan Rice, was immediately out on his natural right-hand side and was free to flow seemingly where he wanted to be. The exact same applied for Phil Foden, who drifted straight over from that left-hand side. We were very lopsided in those opening minutes. But balancing it all out, of course, was the brilliance of Jude Bellingham, who put in an excellent first half display. He was absolutely everywhere and doing everything. His technique was excellent, the weight of his passing. He was confident, he was arrogant, he was getting in the face of Serbia, he was drawing fouls. He had that absolutely inch-perfect half-volleyed cross-field ball out to Walker to just get us out of danger when there was a bit of pressure building over on the left. And alongside Declan Rice marshalling the midfield, Bellingham was our sort of source of creativity in that number 10 role, as you'd expect, and he kicked off the goal, spreading the ball out from the centre out to Kyle Walker, who this time found Saka in behind Kostic. He cuts in by the line, his crossball takes a generous deflection from Pavlovic's attempted block, and Bellingham fades into the box at the final moment and pops up with that magnificent header to open the scoring. And this is what he does. We've seen him do it all season for Real Madrid, and he's done it for England in our very first game. 13 minutes in felt like a good time to score, especially with Serbia playing that back five. They were trying to stay as compact as possible, and it felt like it might start to open the game a bit more with them having to attack to get a goal back. And although we sustained that pressure for the next 10-15 minutes, we did start to get opened up a little bit at the back, even from the smallest of chances, like Trent Arnold conceding possession right in front of our own box, leading to a Mitrovic shot going just wide of the right-hand post in a flash. And that just showed how quickly things can change and what this Serbia team can do if you let them. Pickford did have it covered, but it was a warning sign. Now, defensively, even though there were a couple of small moments of panic, I was very happy with how the backline played. Gahey, in particular, whilst not doing anything particularly spectacular, was very, very comfortable next to Stones. It was a very impressive tournament debut. He always looked composed on the ball, his passing choices were great. And although there were those couple of moments of panic, we actually reduced Serbia to putting any crosses into the box in the first half to Mitrovic, which is Serbia's main strategy of attack. Now, there were a couple of other things that caught my eye elsewhere on the pitch. One was Harry Kane, who barely touched the ball in that first half. To me, at least for the first 45 minutes, this wasn't much of a problem because unlike he usually does for England, and even for Spurs, he wasn't dropping deep. And even though he's excellent playing now, I think this was a real positive. And I think if he dropped deep too, then he would have clogged things up. Serbia would have been able to hold a bit of a stronger line. So I was happy with him doing what he needed to do, and he'd be hopefully ready for any half chance that comes his way. A problem I did have though, and this was a continuing theme throughout the match, was that left-hand side just really didn't work for me. And that was for two reasons, really. One, of course, is that Trippier, a right-footed right-back, playing at left-back, just didn't quite work. He never looked quite comfortable, even when he was overlapping. Obviously, he's got to switch onto his right foot before he can do anything. He was giving that additional width and depth beyond Foden, but Foden was the bigger problem here in two ways. One was that he was dropping a little bit too central and too much over to the right, that meant that we didn't really have that option over on the left. And the other is defensively. A couple of times when we were defending in front of our own box, he kept dropping his man, and it nearly led to a good chance when his dropped mark was able to play the ball into the box. It was a really elusive performance for him all around, to be honest. And unfortunately for me, if you're a player that's going to be given that freedom to drift wherever you like, you have to be impacting the game, and at the very least you have to be defending. As I say though, the biggest frustration here is that he just wasn't giving us that width on the left, and when you're playing a back five, keeping that width and having those options is absolutely essential. Saka did it fantastically out on the right for the first 45 and was constantly skinning his man, had a lot of joy there, and that really helped us to sustain that pressure that the back five would be able to give Serbia. And so although we had been dominant for spells of the first half, it meant that by the time the half-time whistle was approaching, we'd started to become a bit complacent, we'd reduced a bit, we'd become compact, and it was starting to look like we were doing the Southgate thing of sitting back on a lead. And when the second half started, that became very apparent that that was the case. Serbia came out a lot bolder in the second half, pushing those wing backs higher, and it worked a treat because they put us under more pressure. We struggled to play out of the back, and we just didn't have a lot going on in midfield or attack. Thankfully, our decent defending continued, and we did limit them to too many strong chances in those opening minutes. But this is where it started to become apparent that this Trent in midfield experiment is probably not going to last too long. Defensively, in that role next to Rice, he is just not strong enough. And although he looked great creatively when going forwards, he had a long shot on 55 minutes that tested the keeper. He's not playing in that number 10 role, he still has defensive duties. And I think we just really struggled to control the game in midfield once that pressure was applied. And that's Serbia, you know, thinking about when we're going to be playing stronger teams, I just don't see Trent lasting there. A bit of panic on 58 minutes when Mitrovic was played into the box. Thankfully, Trippier was there to scramble and stop that from going any further. But it was becoming increasingly clear that we were shut into our half, and this dominance that we saw from England in the first was not returning. Mitrovic was subbed for Tadic at 60 minutes, and although that came as a bit of a surprise to me as their top scorer, Serbia actually only got better after that substitution was made, with Vlahovic moving into the number 9 role. 5 to 10 minutes later, it was screaming out for some England changes to reduce the pressure that we were under. And unsurprisingly, on 68 minutes, the first of those changes was Trent Arnold for Henderson and a man bun Conor Gallagher. Not a particularly glamorous change, but it was one that I think did the job. Gallagher was a lot better at mopping up those second balls. He brought energy into that midfield role. And although he drifted forwards a couple of times, he stayed put in that central midfield role. For as good as a first half he had, Saka was completely nullified in the second half. I will give him the benefit of the doubt of a bit of fitness coming into play here, because he was constantly trying to roast his man, and obviously had ended the season injured with Arsenal, so I can forgive him for a little bit of a drop in energy. Surprisingly, Jared Bowen was introduced in his place, and he looked like he was going to have an instant impact when he drove down the wing and played a great cross into the box on 76 minutes, picking out Harry Kane, but his header was saved by Rakovic, pushed onto the crossbar, and Serbia were kept in the game. Despite Southgate's changes though, Serbia were not out of it at all up the other end. And this was in part because when we did have the ball in their final third, we were so ineffective. And Phil Foden, again, I hate to say it, he was making mistakes that were costing us at the back. At one point, Harry Kane had picked up the pitch and was driving down the centre, held up the ball for Phil Foden, and then he played a lazy ball into midfield for Conor Gallagher that was intercepted, and Serbia was straight up the other end attacking. And on 81 minutes, the biggest heart-in-mouth moments came, with Vlahovic shooting from outside the box and forcing Pickford to tip the ball over his crossbar. And then Harry Kane having to head another shot out of the course of goal from the resulting corner. And I really think that that one was going in if he wasn't there, because it looked like Pickford was diving out the wrong way. Now Kane, again, other than that chance to make it 2-0, very quiet in the second half, though he did win a ton of fouls. I think it was 5 in total that really eased up the pressure and broke up play when we needed to. And on that note, there was a bit of naivety in England's game. A couple of chances right towards the end, got a couple of free kicks, a chance to take the sting out, slow things down. We're taking them quickly and then losing the ball, and then Serbia are attacking us again. On 85 minutes, man of the match Bellingham made way, and Kobbie Mainoo came on for his tournament debut. But he didn't really get a chance to show what he's about in those closing minutes as we saw out the game. And then thankfully, after 4 minutes of added time, the ref blew the whistle for full time, and it was 1-0 England, sending us top of Group C. Now thinking about it the next day, it was a bit of a strange match, to be honest. It was was very England in some regards and very not England in others. In that opening 25-30 minutes, we looked dynamic, we looked like we had threats all over the pitch. But of course, after the goal and in the second half in particular, we became really reserved. We were cagey, we looked nervous. But, and not just being an optimistic and blind England fan, I think there are some positives to take from that. We started off the tournament with a clean sheet. At this point, we're one of only 2 out of 14 teams so far that have done that. The defence looked solid, even with Trippier in that left-back role. Pickford was commanding as ever. Very, very impressed with Bellingham. And Rice, as I say, I've not talked about much in this video, but I think he is excellent for England and he put in another strong display and really got us out of danger a few times. Kane was quiet, but he was drawing those fouls. He popped up with that big block at the end. Saka had that really strong first half. For me right now, the issues to address are Trent Arnold and Foden. And if I'm being totally honest, I don't see Trent Arnold starting the next game. But Foden is the trickier one to work out. I think if Shaw comes in soon, it will help to solve the issue because obviously he's a left-footed left back. He gives us that width on the side and it will allow Foden to drift in without there being that real missing presence on the left flank. If he is away from returning for England, I do think there's a question mark over Foden starting or where he plays on the pitch. After having such an excellent season for Man City, we can't afford to keep making excuses. He has to turn up for England at some point. I know he's played a lot more centrally under Guardiola, but this is a footballer that is supposed to be one of the best in the Premier League and the best in the world. And he has to be influencing games regardless of where he has started. And like I say, it's not as though Southgate has said stay out on the left. He's given him that freedom to drift in, but he wasn't particularly impactful there either. But anyway, the most important thing is starting off with a win, and we just did exactly that. I think it's only 2 in 10 Euro opening games that we've won, so it really shows you the importance of getting off the mark early. Denmark away on Thursday now after their 1-1 draw with Slovenia yesterday afternoon. Did us a real favour popping up with that second half goal, meaning that we are already 2 points clear at the top. I'll be posting a match preview for that later this week before Thursday, so if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and you'll be notified when that one is ready and up. Do let me know what you made of England's performance in the comments below and I'll catch you next time. Cheers!